Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan Podcast. Today we're diving into a topic that might seem a little unusual at first, but trust me, it's fascinating. We're going to be talking about eclipses,
Right.
and specifically how they're viewed in Islamic tradition.
Interesting.
Our deep dive is taking us straight to the Sahih Bukhari,
Okay.
specifically Book 18,
Right.
which is dedicated entirely to eclipses.
It might surprise you, but this collection of sayings and traditions attributed to the Prophet Muhammad tackles eclipses head-on,
Okay.
offering a perspective that blends scientific observation with spiritual reflection in a really insightful way.
Okay, so we've got these hadiths about eclipses.
Yes.
And the first thing that really struck me was how they debunk some common myths
Absolutely.
that were floating around at the time.
You see, back then, people often associated eclipses with negative events like the death of an important person. There was this belief that the sun or the moon was being eaten or somehow affected by these events in the human realm.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, an eclipse is a pretty dramatic event.
Right.
The sun suddenly going dark in the middle of the day.
It's frightening. I can see how people would try to find an explanation,
Of course.
and connecting it to something significant like a death would feel kind of natural, I guess.
Exactly, but the hadiths directly challenge this interpretation.
Okay.
For instance, Hadith 153 talks about a solar eclipse that occurred on the same day the Prophet Muhammad's son Ibrahim passed away.
Oh, wow.
Naturally, people started linking the two,
Right.
assuming the eclipse was a result of Ibrahim's death.
I can almost hear the whispers, right? Look, the sun is mourning the prophet's son. That kind of thing.
Precisely. But the Prophet Muhammad, in his wisdom, clarifies that this isn't the case at all.
Huh.
He emphasizes that eclipses are not caused by human events,
Okay.
whether joyous or sorrowful.
Interesting.
Instead, he presents them as signs from Allah,
Okay.
events that are meant to evoke awe and reflection,
Mm.
not fear or panic.
Mm.
So it's like instead of attributing these cosmic events to earthly occurrences,
Yeah.
the prophet is shifting the focus towards a higher power, towards a divine plan.
Exactly. It's a reframing of the entire event.
Okay.
Instead of being a harbinger of doom or a reaction to human affairs,
Right.
the eclipse becomes a reminder of Allah's power and the grandeur of his creation. This concept of signs in Islamic theology is really crucial.
Got it.
They're not just random happenings,
Right.
but events that carry a deeper meaning,
Yeah.
prompting believers to contemplate their relationship with God and the world around them.
So it's about looking beyond the immediate observable event
Yes.
and recognizing a deeper spiritual significance.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
In a world where we're often focused on the immediate, the tangible,
Right.
these hadiths invite us to pause,
And
look up at the sky, and ponder the larger forces at play.
it seems like this invitation to reflection is directly linked to another consistent theme across the hadiths, the call to prayer during an eclipse.
Absolutely. Multiple hadiths explicitly mention the Prophet Muhammad instructing Muslims to pray during an eclipse. For example, Hadith 154 describes the Prophet leading a congregational prayer during a solar eclipse.
Okay.
And it goes into detail about the specific actions and duration of this prayer.
So there's this sense of urgency, a need to respond to this celestial event with a specific act of worship.
Exactly. And the details of the prayer are fascinating, too.
Oh.
The hadith mentions prolonged standing, bowing, and prostration, almost as if the physical act of prayer is mirroring the awe and humility inspired by the eclipse itself.
Wow. So the prayer itself becomes kind of physical manifestation of the spiritual experience of the eclipse.
You could say that. It's like the physical posture is mirroring the internal state of the worshiper,
It's interesting.
a state of surrender and awe in the face of this extraordinary cosmic event.
I see.
And it raises an interesting question.
What's that?
What exactly is the significance of this specific prayer? Is it a plea for protection, a way to avert potential harm during the eclipse? Or is it a more profound act of submission, acknowledging Allah's power during a moment of perceived disruption in the natural order?
Or maybe it's a combination of both. A way to find solace and understanding amidst the awe-inspiring display to connect with the divine during a potentially unsettling event.
It's likely all of that and more.
Wow.
This prayer serves as a spiritual anchor during a time that could feel chaotic or even frightening.
Right.
It reaffirms the belief that even amidst extraordinary occurrences, believers can turn towards Allah in prayer and find guidance and peace.
So while the scientific reality of the eclipse is acknowledged,
Yes.
the emphasis is shifted towards its spiritual significance and the appropriate response from a believer.
Precisely. It's a beautiful blend of scientific observation and spiritual interpretation. The Hadiths are not denying the natural phenomenon, but they are placing it within a framework of meaning that resonates with the core principles of Islamic faith.
Mm.
And there's another layer to this idea of prayer during an eclipse. Some hadiths, like 159, 162, and 164, connect the eclipse prayer with seeking refuge from the punishment of the grave.
That's a connection I wouldn't have expected. Let me unpack that a bit. What exactly is the punishment of the grave in Islamic belief?
Right.
But how does it relate to an eclipse?
It's a fascinating connection, isn't it? The punishment of the grave in Islamic tradition refers to a period of questioning and trial that a person undergoes in their grave after death but before the day of judgment. It's a time of reckoning where individuals are held accountable for their beliefs and actions during their earthly life.
So it's like a preliminary judgment.
Yes.
A taste of what's to come on the day of judgment itself.
Exactly. And the questioning focuses on the core tenets of faith.
Okay.
Angels will approach the deceased and ask, who is your Lord? What is your religion?
Oh, go ahead.
Who is your prophet?
Got it.
True believers, those whose faith was genuine and unwavering, will answer with clarity and conviction.
I see.
But those who harbored doubts or whose faith was superficial might falter, revealing their uncertainty.
It's like a final exam, but for your soul. And I can see how the eclipse, with its sudden darkness, its disruption of the natural order, could be seen as a kind of symbolic representation of this trial, this moment of reckoning.
That's a great insight. The eclipse becomes a tangible reminder of the intangible realm of the afterlife and judgment. It's a cosmic event that shakes us out of our complacency and forces us to confront the ultimate reality of our mortality and the accountability that awaits us.
So praying during an eclipse in this context takes on a whole new meaning. It's not just about responding to the event itself, but about preparing for that final test, that encounter with the divine in the grave.
Exactly. The eclipse becomes a catalyst for introspection, a reminder to examine our beliefs, strengthen our faith, and ensure that we are ready to face that ultimate moment of truth. It's like a spiritual wake-up call, prompting us to realign our lives with the principles of Islam and reaffirm our commitment to God.
It adds a layer of urgency and depth to the act of prayer, doesn't it? It's not just a ritual, but a preparation for something far greater.
Precisely. And this connection between eclipses and the afterlife is further emphasized in other hadiths.
Okay.
For instance, Hadith 161 recounts a vision the Prophet Muhammad had during an eclipse prayer, where he was granted a glimpse of both paradise and hell.
That's an incredibly powerful image. To see, even for a moment, the ultimate destinations of the soul.
Right.
The rewards of paradise and the punishments of hell.
It's a vision that speaks volumes, doesn't it? First and foremost, it confirms the reality of the afterlife.
Right.
The belief that our existence doesn't end with death, but continues in another realm.
Got it.
And secondly, it highlights the consequences of our choices. The stark contrast between a life lived in accordance with God's will and a life that strays from that path.
It's almost as if the eclipse, with its disruption of the familiar, is creating a bridge between this earthly realm and the hereafter, allowing a glimpse into what lies beyond.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And this vision also adds a layer of urgency to the call to prayer and repentance during an eclipse. It's a reminder that our actions in this life have eternal implications, that the choices we make today will shape our destiny in the hereafter.
It's a powerful message, and one that's sure to resonate with anyone who believes in an afterlife.
Yeah.
But there's a specific detail in this hadith that I think is important to address.
Okay.
The Prophet mentions seeing mostly women in hell.
Right.
And he offers an explanation for this observation.
Yeah.
It's a potentially sensitive topic, so I'd appreciate it if you could navigate it with nuance and context.
Absolutely. It's essential to approach such passages with sensitivity and a deep understanding of the historical and cultural context in which they were revealed. The Prophet attributes the large number of women in hell to their ungratefulness. But this term needs to be understood within the specific social norms of the time.
So it's not about condemning women as a whole.
No, not at all.
But about addressing specific behaviors and attitudes that were prevalent at the time.
Exactly. Ungratefulness in this context likely refers to behaviors like disobedience to husbands.
I see.
Which was considered a grave sin in that society. and a lack of appreciation for the blessings in one's life.
It's important to emphasize that these were societal norms of the time
Yes, definitely.
and don't reflect a universal condemnation of women.
Absolutely. The Quran, the central text of Islam, consistently emphasizes the equality of men and women before God and their equal potential for spiritual growth and reward.
Right.
This particular hadith is addressing specific issues within a specific context.
Okay.
And should not be misinterpreted as a blanket statement about all women.
That's a crucial clarification. The principles of faith and righteous conduct apply to all believers equally, regardless of gender.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that Islamic teachings, when understood within their proper context, promote justice, compassion, and respect for all individuals.
Now, there's another hadith that stood out to me, and it seems to connect these profound spiritual reflections with a very concrete act of social justice. Hadith 163 mentions the Prophet ordering the freeing of slaves during an eclipse.
That's a fascinating detail, isn't it? It demonstrates how the Prophet linked spiritual practices with actions that promoted social change and alleviated suffering.
Can you talk about the context of slavery at the time?
Sure.
And how this act reflects the Islamic teachings on compassion and social justice?
Certainly. Slavery was a deeply ingrained institution during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, as it was in many parts of the world. However, Islam sought to mitigate its harshness and ultimately aimed for its abolition. The Prophet himself freed slaves and encouraged others to do the same, emphasizing the inherent dignity of all human beings.
So even though slavery was a part of the social fabric, the Prophet was actively working towards its dismantling.
Yes, and his act of freeing slaves during an eclipse adds another layer of meaning to this endeavor.
Okay.
It connects a profound spiritual experience with a tangible act of liberation, demonstrating that true faith should manifest in actions that benefit others, especially those who are marginalized and oppressed.
It's like saying that recognizing the power and majesty of God during an eclipse should also inspire us to recognize the inherent worth of all human beings and work towards their freedom and well-being.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It highlights the interconnectedness of our spiritual lives and our social responsibilities. True worship involves not just rituals and prayers, but actively working towards a more just and compassionate society, a society where the vulnerable are protected and everyone is treated with dignity and respect.
It's a powerful reminder that faith should translate into action, that our beliefs should inspire us to make a positive difference in the world.
Precisely. And this act of freeing slaves during an eclipse serves as a timeless example of how spiritual observances can be catalysts for social change, and a testament to the Islamic values of compassion, justice, and human dignity. You know, as we delve deeper into these hadiths, what really strikes me is the emphasis on the experiential aspect of the eclipse prayer. It's not just about going through the motions, but about fully immersing oneself in the act of worship, allowing the awe and magnitude of the event to shape the prayer itself.
You're right. I'm thinking about those hadith that describe the Prophet Muhammad leading the eclipse prayer, like Hadith 156 and 157. They mention the prolonged nature of the prayer, especially the standing, bowing, and prostrations. It's almost as if the physical actions are echoing the intensity of the spiritual experience.
Exactly. It's not just a routine prayer. There's a heightened sense of reverence and humility. Aisha, the Prophet's wife, even commented on the unusual length of the prostrations during the eclipse prayer, noting how different it was from his usual practice.
It seems like the Prophet intentionally prolonged the prayer, as if to emphasize the gravity of the event. Do you think there's a specific reason for this?
It's fascinating, isn't it? I believe it's about cultivating a deeper level of presence and connection with God during this extraordinary moment. The extended postures, the prolonged recitation of the Quran, it all contributes to a more profound and immersive experience of prayer.
So it's not just about saying the words, but about embodying the spirit of the prayer, allowing the physical actions to amplify the inner state of awe and submission.
Precisely. The physical act of prayer becomes a reflection of the internal state, a way to externalize the feelings of humility and surrender that the eclipse evokes. It's like the body is participating in the prayer, not just the mind.
And it's not just the duration that's significant. The hadiths also highlight the unique structure of the eclipse prayer. Hadith 160, for example, mentions the Prophet performing 2 bowings in each rak'ah. A deviation from the typical structure of daily prayers.
That's a great observation. This departure from the norm further underscores the special nature of the eclipse prayer. It signifies that this is not an ordinary event, but a sign from God that demands a unique and heightened response.
So it's like the eclipse prompts a more intense, more elaborate form of prayer,
Yes.
both in duration and structure,
Uh-huh.
reflecting the magnitude of the event and the depth of the spiritual experience it evokes.
Exactly. The Hadiths are essentially providing a framework for experiencing the eclipse in a way that deepens our connection with God, using physical actions to enhance and amplify the spiritual dimension of the event.
You know, as we've been talking about the spiritual significance of eclipses, I
Yes.
keep thinking about Hadith 167,
Okay.
the one narrated by Abu Musa.
Mhm.
It describes the prophet's reaction to a solar eclipse, saying he got up being afraid that it might be the hour, i.e., Day of Judgment.
That's a powerful image, isn't it? Even the Prophet Muhammad, with his profound faith and knowledge, was deeply moved by the eclipse.
Right.
It speaks to the raw power of these celestial events and their ability to evoke awe and even fear.
It's a reminder that even the most devout individuals can be shaken by the sheer scale and mystery of the cosmos.
Mm.
It humanizes the prophet, showing that he wasn't immune to the emotions that such events can inspire.
Absolutely. It also highlights the connection between eclipses and the concept of the Day of Judgment in Islamic tradition.
Okay.
A connection that we see echoed in several other hadiths.
Can you elaborate on that connection a bit? Why would an eclipse evoke thoughts of the Day of Judgment? What's the link there?
The Day of Judgment in Islamic belief is the day when all of humanity will be held accountable for their actions and judged by God.
Okay.
It's the culmination of our existence, the end of this world, and the beginning of the eternal realm.
So it's the ultimate moment of truth, the final reckoning.
Precisely. And an eclipse with its sudden darkness, the temporary disruption of the natural order, could be seen as a symbolic foreshadowing of this momentous event. The sun vanishing from the sky. The world plunged into an unexpected darkness. It evokes a sense of awe and trepidation that resonates with the descriptions of the Day of Judgment in Islamic scripture.
So the eclipse, in a sense, becomes a microcosm of the Day of Judgment.
Yeah.
A small-scale reminder of the ultimate cosmic event that awaits us.
Exactly. It's a wake-up call.
Okay.
Prompting us to reflect on the fleeting nature of this life, the inevitability of our return to God, and the importance of living in accordance with His will.
It's fascinating how the Hadiths use these celestial events to convey such profound theological concepts. The eclipse becomes a tangible reminder of the intangible realm of the afterlife and judgment,
Right.
prompting reflection and encouraging a deeper connection with the divine.
You know, as we've journeyed through these hadiths, exploring their insights and contemplating their deeper meanings, I'm struck by the way they seamlessly weave together the scientific and the spiritual.
Me too. It's a reminder that science and spirituality are not mutually exclusive, but can coexist and even enhance each other. The Hadiths acknowledge the natural phenomenon of eclipses, while simultaneously imbuing them with a deeper spiritual significance,
Right.
guiding believers to a richer understanding of their relationship with God and the cosmos.
It's an approach that encourages both intellectual curiosity and spiritual contemplation, inviting us to explore the world around us while acknowledging the mysteries that lie beyond our grasp. What stands out to you most about this perspective?
I think it's the emphasis on action.
Mm.
The way these Hadiths don't just tell us what to think about eclipses,
Right.
but how to respond to them.
Yeah.
From the specific prayers and acts of worship to the call for social justice exemplified by freeing slaves.
Yeah.
It's about translating spiritual reflection into concrete action, making faith an active force in our lives and in the world.
That's a beautiful insight. It highlights the interconnectedness of our inner lives and our outward actions, reminding us that true faith manifests in both contemplation and deeds.
And as we conclude this deep dive, I think that's a powerful message to carry with us. Perhaps this exploration has sparked some questions for you. Made you wonder about how different cultures and belief systems view celestial events like eclipses. What role does fear play in shaping our understanding of the natural world? What can we learn from other traditions about the interplay of science and spirituality?
These are questions worth pondering, and as we conclude this deep dive into the Sahih Bukhari's perspective on eclipses, we encourage you to continue exploring these questions, to reflect on your own relationship with the cosmos, and to seek knowledge and understanding with an open heart and a curious mind.